Welcome to Her True Stories. If you love tales of justice, revenge, and life's unexpected turns, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next in this incredible story of betrayal and sweet revenge. My name is Meredith Backer, and at 75 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. Boy, was I wrong. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but let me tell you, after what my son did to me, I was ready to serve it ice cold with a side of poetic justice. It all started on a Tuesday morning in March, the kind of day that should have been ordinary but turned out to be anything but. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one with the faded blue upholstery that Harold, my late husband, used to complain about, reading the morning paper when my son Marcus burst through my front door without so much as a knock. "Mom, we need to talk," he announced, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he'd perfected as a successful real estate developer. At 42, Marcus had grown into the kind of man who wore expensive suits and thought money could solve everything. How wrong he was about that last part. I folded my newspaper carefully, the way I'd been taught to do things properly, and looked up at my only child. "Good morning to you too, dear. Would you like some coffee?" "This isn't a social visit." He remained standing, towering over me in what I recognized as one of his intimidation tactics. "I've been thinking about your living situation." Those words sent a chill down my spine, but I kept my expression neutral. "What about it? You're getting older, Mom. This house is too big for you. You had that fall last month." I slipped on some ice, Marcus. "It happens to people of all ages." "And what about when you forgot to turn off the stove last week?" I bristled at that. I was distracted because Mrs. Henderson called about her cat getting stuck in my shed. It was hardly senility setting in. Marcus walked over to the window, his hands clasped behind his back in that pompous way that reminded me uncomfortably of his father during his more arrogant moments. "I found you a place. Sunset Manor. It's a very nice assisted living facility." "Assisted living?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Marcus, I can take care of myself perfectly well. Can you? Because I've been talking to the neighbors, and they're concerned. Mrs. Patterson mentioned you've been acting odd lately." I knew exactly what he was referring to. Mrs. Patterson, the neighborhood busybody, had caught me talking to Harold's photograph while I was gardening. It was something I'd been doing since he passed 5 years ago, having little conversations with his picture to help me feel less alone. But I wasn't about to explain that to Marcus. "I am not moving to some facility," I said firmly. Marcus turned around, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. "Mom, I'm not asking."
"I'm telling."
"I've already put a deposit down. You'll be moving next week." "You can't just." "Actually, I can. I've been handling your finances since Dad died, remember? And frankly, this house is more of an asset than you need. I can sell it, invest the money properly, and make sure you're taken care of." The way he said "taken care of" made my skin crawl. This wasn't about my well-being. This was about money. My house, the one Harold and I had bought when Marcus was just a baby, the one where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases and anniversaries, was nothing more than a dollar sign to him. "I won't go," I said quietly. Marcus's face hardened. "Then you'll be making this difficult for both of us." "The papers are already signed, Mom. I have power of attorney, remember? Dad made sure of that before he died." I remembered. Harold had been so worried about me managing a loan that he'd insisted Marcus handle the legal and financial matters. It had seemed reasonable at the time. Now it felt like a trap. "You have 1 week to pack," Marcus continued. "I'll arrange for movers to handle the furniture. Most of it won't fit in your new place anyway." After he left, I sat in that chair for hours, staring at the wall where Harold's photograph smiled back at me. "What am I going to do?" I whispered to the picture. "Our boy has turned into someone I don't recognize." But Harold's smile seemed to tell me to be patient, to wait, and see what opportunities might present themselves. If only I'd known then what was coming. The next morning, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. It was something I'd been doing more often since Harold passed, long walks through our neighborhood, sometimes extending to the small shopping district a few blocks away. Marcus would have called it wandering if he'd known, another sign of my supposed declining mental state. I found myself at Murphy's Corner Store, the little family-owned shop that had been a neighborhood fixture for 30 years. Old Mr. Murphy had passed away the previous year, but his daughter Kelly kept the place running with the same warm, friendly atmosphere. "Morning, Mrs. Backer," Kelly called out as I entered. "How are you holding up?" Word traveled fast in small neighborhoods. I was sure she'd heard about Marcus's plans through the gossip network that kept everyone informed about everyone else's business. "Oh, you know," I said with a forced smile, taking it one day at a time. I wandered through the store, not really looking for anything in particular, when I found myself standing in front of the lottery ticket display. Harold and I had never been gamblers, but something about those colorful tickets caught my attention. Maybe it was the desperation talking, or maybe it was the rebellious streak I'd buried under decades of being a proper wife and mother. "I'd like to buy a lottery ticket," I announced. Kelly looked surprised. "Really? Which one?" I studied the options. There was the daily pick 3, the weekly draw, and then there was the big one, the super jackpot, currently sitting at $12 million. $12 million. The number seemed almost fictional. "That one," I said, pointing to the super jackpot display. "Good choice. It's been rolling over for weeks. Someone's going to win big soon." Kelly processed my purchase and handed me the ticket. "Good luck, Mrs. Backer." I tucked the ticket into my purse and forgot about it almost immediately. I had bigger problems to worry about than imaginary millions. The rest of the week passed in a blur of packing and trying to come to terms with my new reality. Marcus had been true to his word. Movers arrived on Friday to start boxing up my life. I watched them wrap Harold's favorite lamp in bubble wrap and wondered if I'd ever see it again. "The truck will be here Monday morning," Marcus informed me as he supervised the packing. "I'll pick you up at 8 to drive you to Sunset Manor." "How generous of you," I muttered. He either didn't hear the sarcasm or chose to ignore it. "You'll like it there, Mom. They have activities, people your own age to talk to. It'll be good for you." That night, alone in my mostly empty house, I sat on the floor next to a box of Harold's belongings that I'd insisted on keeping with me. Inside were his reading glasses, his favorite coffee mug, and a small notebook where he used to jot down ideas for home improvement projects he never got around to finishing. I flipped through the notebook, smiling at his terrible handwriting and optimistic plans. On the last page, he'd written something I'd never seen before. "For Meredith, never let them dim your light. You're stronger than you know." I pressed the notebook to my chest and cried for the first time since Marcus had delivered his ultimatum. Harold had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Maybe it was time to remember that strength he'd seen in me. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Henderson from next door knocked on my door, holding a plate of her famous chocolate chip cookies. "I heard about tomorrow," she said gently. I wanted to say goodbye properly. We sat in my empty kitchen, eating cookies off paper plates since all my dishes were packed away. "I'm going to miss you," Mrs. Henderson said. "You've been such a good neighbor. Always willing to help when my Arthur was sick. Always there with a kind word." "I'll miss you too," I replied honestly. "That son of yours," she continued, shaking her head. "I know it's not my place to say, but this doesn't seem right. You're sharp as a tack, Meredith. There's nothing wrong with you that a little companionship wouldn't cure." Her words meant more to me than she could know. After she left, I decided to take one last walk around the neighborhood, to say goodbye to the places that had been part of my daily routine for 43 years. I ended up back at Murphy's Corner Store, drawn perhaps by the need for familiar comfort. Kelly was behind the counter, as always. "Mrs. Backer, I was hoping you'd come in. I have something for you. She reached under the counter and pulled out a newspaper. The lottery drawing was last night. I always check the tickets sold here. It's kind of a tradition. And you're not going to believe this. She opened the paper to the lottery section and pointed to a series of numbers. Then she pulled out a copy of my ticket. Apparently, she'd made a photocopy before giving me the original. Those numbers match, she said, her voice filled with excitement. Mrs. Backer, you won. You won the $12 million jackpot. I stared at the numbers, then at the ticket, then back at the numbers. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Are you sure? I whispered. Positive. I've checked 3 times. You're a millionaire, Mrs. Backer. I sat down heavily on the wooden stool Kelly kept behind the counter for elderly customers. $12 million. $12 million that Marcus didn't know about. $12 million that could change everything. What do I do now? I asked. Kelly's grin was infectious. Well, first you need to sign the back of that ticket and put it somewhere very safe. Then you need to call the lottery office. But Mrs. Backer, you just bought yourself some options. I walked home in a daze, the winning ticket burning a hole in my purse. Marcus was supposed to pick me up in 12 hours to drive me to my new life of scheduled activities and shared bathrooms. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't going to happen after all. That night, I barely slept. I kept getting up to check that the ticket was still in my purse, still real, still the answer to prayers I hadn't even known I was praying. At 7:30 Monday morning, Marcus arrived to find me sitting calmly in my living room, fully dressed but surrounded by my unpacked suitcases. Mom, what are you doing? The truck's going to be here any minute. I've changed my mind, I said simply. Marcus laughed, actually laughed. Mom, you can't change your mind. It's done. The deposit's paid. Your room is ready. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'm not going. His expression shifted from amusement to irritation. We've been through this. You don't have a choice. That's when I stood up and walked to my purse. I pulled out the lottery ticket and held it up for him to see. Actually, Marcus, I do have a choice. I have 12 million choices, in fact. The look on Marcus's face was worth every sleepless hour I'd spent clutching that lottery ticket. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and for the first time in years, my successful, confident son was completely speechless. What is that? He finally managed. This, I said, holding the ticket higher, is a winning lottery ticket worth $12 million. I bought it last Tuesday, the day before you came here with your ultimatum. Marcus's eyes fixed on the ticket with laser focus. I could practically see the calculations running through his head, the dollar signs, the investment opportunities, the power that kind of money represented. Mom, that's incredible. His tone had completely changed, becoming warm and enthusiastic. We need to get you to the lottery office right away to claim this. And then we should talk to my financial advisor about the best way to invest. I interrupted. There's no we in this, Marcus. This is my ticket, bought with my money, on my own time. But, Mom, you'll need help managing this kind of windfall. $12 million is a lot of responsibility. You could be taken advantage of by scam artists or make poor investment choices. The way you were taking advantage of me, by forcing me into a home I didn't want. Marcus had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but only slightly. That was different. That was about your safety and well-being. No, it was about selling my house and controlling my life. Well, guess what? I don't need you to control anything for me anymore. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think it's time for you to leave. Mom, you're being emotional. You need to think about this rationally. I am thinking rationally. For the first time in 5 years, I'm thinking with perfect clarity. Get out. Marcus stood there for a moment, clearly torn between his desire to argue and his realization that the power dynamic had just shifted dramatically. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes, it is." After he left, I called the moving company and canceled the truck. Then I called Sunset Manor and withdrew my application. Finally, I called the lottery office and made an appointment to claim my prize. But first, I did something I should have done years ago. I called my lawyer. Robert Chin had handled Harold's and my legal affairs for over 20 years. He was semi-retired now, but he'd always told me to call if I needed anything. "Meredith, how are you holding up?" His voice was warm and familiar. "I'm doing well, Robert, but I need your help with something important. Can you meet me this afternoon?" "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Actually, everything is about to be very all right. But I need to make sure I do this properly." We met at his office at 2 o'clock. Robert's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline as I explained the situation. Marcus's power of attorney, the forced move, and now the lottery win. 12 million, he repeated. "Meredith, that's wonderful. But I can see why you're concerned about the legal implications." "I want to revoke Marcus's power of attorney," I said firmly. "And I want to make sure he can't claim any right to this money." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "The power of attorney can be revoked immediately. You have every right to do that. As for the lottery winnings, since you purchased the ticket with your own money and you're of sound mind, those winnings are entirely yours. Marcus would have no legal claim to them." "What if he argues that I'm not of sound mind? He's been building a case that I'm becoming senile." "Have you been experiencing any cognitive difficulties?" "None whatsoever. I think Marcus was confusing loneliness with dementia." Robert smiled. "Well, let's make sure there's no confusion. I'm going to arrange for you to have a full cognitive assessment done by a qualified psychologist. When you pass with flying colors, which I'm confident you will, it will be official documentation of your mental competency." Over the next few days, I went through the process of claiming my lottery prize. The media attention was intense, but manageable. Apparently, a 75-year-old woman winning $12 million was quite the human interest story. I did a few interviews, always emphasizing how I planned to use the money to maintain my independence and help others. Marcus, meanwhile, had been calling constantly. I let every call go to voicemail. His messages started out conciliatory, then became demanding, and finally turned threatening. "Mom, you can't just ignore me. I'm your son. We need to discuss this like adults. You don't understand the complexities of managing this kind of money. This is ridiculous, Mom. You're acting like a child. I'm coming over tomorrow, and we're going to sort this out. If you want to play hardball, we'll play hardball. I'll see you in court if I have to." That last message prompted me to call Robert again. "He's threatening legal action," I told him. "On what grounds?" "He has no case, Meredith." "Maybe not, but he could make my life difficult while he tries." "True. Would you like me to send him a cease and desist letter?" "Not yet. I have a better idea." Robert chuckled. "I've known you for 20 years, Meredith, and that tone in your voice usually means trouble for someone. What are you planning?" "Let's just say I'm going to give Marcus exactly what he deserves." That evening, I sat in Harold's favorite chair, which I'd rescued from the moving boxes, and began to plan. Marcus thought he could manipulate me, control me, and ultimately profit from me. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I started by researching everything I could about Marcus's business. His real estate development company had done well over the years, but like many businesses, it had its vulnerabilities. I spent hours online, reading financial reports, property records, and news articles about his various projects. What I found was very interesting indeed. Marcus had been cutting corners on his latest development, a low-income housing project that was supposed to provide affordable homes for working families. Instead of using the quality materials specified in his contract with the city, he'd been substituting cheaper alternatives and pocketing the difference. The The project was behind schedule and over budget, and Marcus was facing some serious financial pressure. Even more interesting was the fact that the project's financing was coming due in 6 months. If Marcus couldn't come up with the money to complete construction, he'd lose everything: his investment, his reputation, and possibly face legal action from the city. I smiled as I closed my laptop. Marcus needed money, and he'd assumed his elderly mother's lottery winnings would solve his problems. He was about to discover that assumptions could be dangerous things. The next morning, I called Marcus's office. Marcus Backer's office. This is Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer. This is Marcus's mother, Meredith. Is he available?
Oh,
Mrs. Backer. Yes, let me put you right through. He's been hoping you'd call. I'm sure he has, I thought.
Mom.
Marcus's voice was full of false warmth. I'm so glad you called. I've been worried about you. Have you? How thoughtful. Marcus, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I believe you might be right. Silence. Then, right about what? About me needing help managing this money. It is a lot of responsibility. Well, yes, it is. I'm glad you're seeing reason. So, I'd like to invite you over for dinner tonight. We can discuss how you might help me. That sounds perfect, Mom. Should I bring Diane? Diane was his wife, a woman who'd never particularly liked me and made no effort to hide it. Let's make it just the two of us. Like old times. Wonderful. I'll be there at 7. After I hung up, I began preparing for what would be the most important dinner of my life, and possibly the last meal Marcus would ever want to share with me. I spent that afternoon cooking Marcus's favorite meal. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes, the same dinner I'd made for his birthday every year when he was growing up. It seemed appropriate, considering what I had planned. At exactly 7 o'clock, Marcus knocked on my door. He was carrying a bottle of expensive wine and wearing his most charming smile. Mom, you look wonderful, he said, kissing my cheek. This whole lottery thing seems to agree with you. I do feel rejuvenated, I replied, leading him into the dining room. The table was set with my good china, the set Harold and I had received as a wedding gift and used only for special occasions. This certainly qualified. Wine? Marcus asked, already opening the bottle he'd brought. Just a small glass. You know I'm not much of a drinker. We sat down to eat, and Marcus immediately launched into his plans for my money. I've been thinking about investment strategies, he said between bites of pot roast. With 12 million, we could diversify across several portfolios. Some conservative bonds for stability, some growth stocks for long-term appreciation, maybe some real estate investments. That sounds very complicated, I said. It doesn't have to be. That's what I'm here for. I could set up a trust, make myself the trustee to handle all the day-to-day management. You'd never have to worry about any of it. And you'd charge a fee for the service? Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Family rates, of course. Maybe 2% annually, very reasonable for comprehensive financial management. 2% of $12 million. That would be $240,000 a year for Marcus, just for managing money that wasn't even his. The audacity was breathtaking. That does sound reasonable, I agreed. But before we make any decisions, I'm curious about something. What's that? Your business. How is the River Creek development coming along? Marcus nearly choked on his wine. River Creek? Why do you ask about that? Well, if you're going to be managing my money, I want to know how well you manage your own. It's only prudent. River Creek it's going fine. These big projects always have their challenges, but we're working through them. I read in the paper that you're behind schedule, and there was something about material quality issues. Marcus's jaw tightened. You can't believe everything you read in the papers, Mom. Journalists don't understand the complexities of construction projects. So there aren't any problems? Nothing that can't be handled. I nodded and took a sip of wine. That's good to hear. Because I was thinking, instead of all those complicated investments you mentioned, maybe I should just invest directly in your business. Help you finish River Creek. The fork in Marcus's hand stopped halfway to his mouth. Invest in my business? Why not? You know real estate, you've been successful. It would keep things in the family.
Mom,
That's not really how these things work. Real estate development is risky. You could lose money. But you just told me there were no problems with River Creek. There aren't any major problems, but still, I think we should stick with traditional investments for your money. How convenient. Marcus wanted to manage my money and collect fees from it, but he didn't want to risk any of it on his own failing project. Well, let's table that discussion for now, I said pleasantly. Tell me about Diane and the children. How are they doing? We made small talk through the rest of dinner, but I could see Marcus's mind working. He was calculating, planning, figuring out how to get his hands on my winnings while keeping his own financial problems hidden. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I served coffee and brought out a manila folder I'd prepared earlier. What's that? Marcus asked. Oh, just some papers Robertson prepared for me. Legal documents related to the lottery winnings. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. What kind of documents? Well, there's a new will, of course. With this much money, I need to update my estate planning. That's very smart, Mom. And I've revoked your power of attorney. Marcus went very still. You've what? Revoked your power of attorney. Robert explained that with my new financial situation, I need to maintain direct control over all my affairs. But Mom, that's exactly why you need the power of attorney in place. To protect you from people who might try to take advantage. People like you? The words hung in the air between us. Marcus's face flushed red. I beg your pardon? Marcus, let's be honest with each other. You tried to force me into a nursing home so you could sell my house and control my money. The only reason you're here tonight, being so charming and concerned, is because you found out about the lottery winnings. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you had dinner with me before this week? When's the last time you called just to see how I was doing, without wanting something? Marcus stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. I came here to help you, and you're treating me like some kind of criminal. Sit down, Marcus. We're not finished. Something in my tone made him comply, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I know about River Creek, I continued calmly. I know about the cost overruns, the material substitutions, the financing that's coming due. I know you need money desperately, and you thought my lottery winnings would solve your problems. Marcus's face had gone pale. How do you? Who told you? Public records are wonderful things. Did you know that all city contracts are available for review by taxpayers? Including the specifications for materials that you're supposed to be using versus the cheaper alternatives you've actually been purchasing. You don't understand the construction business. I understand fraud when I see it. Marcus jumped to his feet again. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. You see, I have enough money now to hire investigators, accountants, lawyers, whatever I need to protect myself and expose the truth about your business practices. You wouldn't. I smiled at him. The same smile I'd given him when he was 5 years old and trying to convince me he hadn't broken Harold's favorite mug. Try me. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact instant when he realized that his sweet, naive mother had just declared war on him. This is insane, he said finally. You're my mother. I'm your son. Family doesn't treat family this way. You're absolutely right. Family doesn't treat family the way you've been treating me. But don't worry, Marcus. I'm going to give you exactly what you deserve. Marcus left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I sat in the quiet house, sipping my coffee and feeling more alive than I had in years. The war had begun, and I intended to win it. The next morning, I called Robert Chen's office first thing. I need to hire a private investigator, I told him. Meredith, what exactly are you planning? I'm planning to get the truth about my son's business practices. And I want everything done completely legally and above board. Robert was quiet for a moment. I can recommend someone. Patricia Wong. She's thorough, discreet, and ethical. But Meredith, are you sure about this? Marcus is your son. That's exactly why I'm sure. If he's defrauding the city and cheating families out of decent housing, he needs to be stopped. The fact that he's my son makes it more important, not less. Patricia Wong turned out to be exactly what I needed. A former police detective in her 50s with a no-nonsense attitude and an impressive track record of corporate investigations. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from prying eyes and listening ears. Tell me what you know, she said, pulling out a legal pad. I explained everything. Marcus's financial troubles, the River Creek project, the material substitutions I discovered in the public records. This is a good start, Patricia said when I finished. But if we're going to build a solid case, we need documentation. Invoices, receipts, photographs of the actual materials being used versus what was contracted. This kind of investigation takes time and resources. Money is no longer an issue, I assured her. Patricia smiled. Then let's get to work. While Patricia began her investigation, I started working on the second part of my plan. I called the River Creek Neighborhood Association, the group representing the families who would eventually live in Marcus's development. Mrs. Rodriguez? This is Meredith Backer. I'm Marcus Backer's mother.
Oh,
Mrs. Backer.
we've heard so much about you.
Congratulations on your lottery win. What an amazing story. Thank you. I'm calling because I'm concerned about some things I've heard regarding the River Creek project. Would it be possible for us to meet? Carmen Rodriguez was a social worker and community activist who had been fighting for affordable housing in our city for years. She was also smart, passionate, and completely dedicated to protecting the families she represented. We met at her office the next day, and I was impressed by the wall full of photographs showing the families who were counting on the River Creek development for their homes. These are hardworking people, Carmen explained. Single mothers, elderly couples on fixed incomes, young families just starting out. They've been saving and planning for years to qualify for these homes. The River Creek project represents hope for them, a chance at stable, affordable housing. And they're depending on the homes being built to the specifications promised? Absolutely. These families can't afford major repairs or replacements. They need homes that are built to last with quality materials and workmanship. I took a deep breath. Carmen, I have reason to believe that my son may not be delivering what he promised. Carmen's expression grew serious. What kind of reasons? I explained what I discovered, watching Carmen's face grow more concerned with each detail. If this is true, she said finally, it's not just fraud. It's stealing hope from families who have very little to begin with. I'm having it investigated professionally. But I wanted you to know, so you can prepare to protect your families if necessary. Carmen leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Backer, can I ask you something? Why are you doing this? Marcus is your son. It was the same question Robert had asked, the same question I'd been asking myself. 20 years ago, I said slowly, my husband and I bought a house from a developer who cut corners. Within 2 years, we had foundation problems, electrical issues, and a roof that leaked every time it rained. It nearly bankrupted us, and it taught me that a home isn't just a building. It's security, it's stability, it's the foundation for everything else in your life. I gestured toward the photographs on Carmen's wall. These families deserve better than what Harold and I went through. They deserve what they were promised. And if my son is cheating them, then he's not the man I raised him to be. Carmen nodded slowly. What can I do to help? Keep me informed about what's happening with the project. And if the time comes to take action, be ready. Over the next few weeks, Patricia's investigation began to bear fruit. She infiltrated the construction site by posing as a safety inspector and took hundreds of photographs documenting the substandard materials being used. She tracked down suppliers and obtained copies of invoices showing what Marcus had actually purchased versus what he'd claimed to purchase. She even interviewed workers who were willing to testify about the pressure they'd received to cut corners. The evidence was damning, but I wanted more than just proof of Marcus's fraud. I wanted to understand why he'd done it, and I wanted to make sure my response would be appropriately poetic. That's when Patricia uncovered the most interesting piece of information yet. "Your son has been having an affair," she announced during one of our weekly meetings. An affair? I was genuinely surprised. Whatever Marcus's faults, I hadn't expected infidelity to be one of them. With his secretary, Jennifer, the one who answered the phone when you called his office. They've been meeting at the Grandview Hotel every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 8 months. How does this relate to the construction fraud? Well, Marcus has been spending a lot of money on this relationship. Expensive gifts, weekend trips, even a down payment on a condo that's officially in Jennifer's name, but that he's been paying for. I thought about Diane, Marcus's wife, who despite her coolness toward me had always seemed devoted to her husband and children. Does Diane know?
Not yet.
But affairs have a way of coming to light, especially when they involve financial improprieties. What kind of financial improprieties? Patricia consulted her notes. Marcus has been using company funds to pay for his personal expenses related to the affair. Hotel bills charged to business accounts, jewelry purchases categorized as client gifts, that sort of thing. It's another form of fraud, and it's making his financial situation even more desperate. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Marcus wasn't just cheating the families who were counting on him for housing. He was cheating his own wife and children, stealing from his own company to fund an affair. There's more, Patricia continued. The financing for River Creek comes due in 10 weeks. If Marcus can't come up with the money, the project will go into default. The city will have to find another developer to finish it, which could delay completion by months or even years. And the families? They'll have to keep waiting. Some might lose their qualification status if the delays are too long. Others might give up entirely. That night, I sat in Harold's chair and thought about the little boy Marcus had once been. He'd been sweet and curious, always asking questions about how things worked and why people did the things they did. When had he become someone who would steal from working families to pay for hotel rooms with his secretary? I picked up Harold's photograph and studied his familiar smile. "I know what you'd say," I told him. "You'd say he's still our son, that everyone deserves forgiveness and a second chance." I set the photograph down and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood that had been my home for so many decades. Tomorrow, I would put the final phase of my plan into motion. Marcus would get his second chance, but it would come with consequences he never saw coming. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got dressed up. Not just nicely dressed, but dressed to make an impression. I put on my best navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to Harold's funeral, and the pearl necklace he'd given me for our 25th anniversary. I styled my silver hair carefully and even applied a touch of lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not a helpless elderly woman, but a force to be reckoned with. My first stop was Marcus's office. I arrived unannounced, carrying a briefcase that I'd borrowed from Robertson for the occasion. Mrs. Backer, Jennifer, the secretary, looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Marcus isn't in yet. Would you like to wait? Actually, I'd like to speak with you first, if you don't mind." Jennifer's smile faltered slightly. "With me? What about?" "About your relationship with my son." The color drained from Jennifer's face. I don't know what you mean." "Of course you do. The Tuesday and Thursday meetings at the Grandview Hotel, the condo on Elm Street, the jewelry that Marcus has been charging to company accounts. Jennifer sank into her chair. How did you? I hired a private investigator. Did you really think no one would notice? Mrs. Backer, please. I know how this looks, but Marcus and we love each other. His marriage has been over for years. He was going to leave Diane anyway. Was he? And when exactly was this grand departure supposed to happen? Jennifer looked uncomfortable. When his financial situation stabilized. The divorce would be expensive, and with the business pressures? So you were waiting for him to get his hands on my lottery money. It wasn't like that, wasn't it? Tell me, Jennifer, do you know about the problems with the River Creek project? What problems? I opened my briefcase and pulled out copies of some of Patricia's photographs. Images showing the cheap materials being used instead of the quality components specified in the contract. Jennifer stared at the photographs, her face growing paler by the minute. Marcus has been defrauding the city and cheating the families who are counting on those homes. I continued. He's been using substandard materials and pocketing the difference. And he's been using company money to fund your relationship. I didn't know, Jennifer whispered. I swear I didn't know about any of this. Well, now you do. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Jennifer could answer, Marcus walked through the door, talking on his phone. When he saw me sitting there, he ended his call abruptly.
Mom.
What a surprise. What brings you here? I came to make you an offer, I said, standing up. But first, I think you should know that Jennifer and I have been having a very enlightening conversation. Marcus looked back and forth between us, clearly trying to read the situation. Jennifer, could you give us some privacy? He asked. Actually, I think Jennifer should stay. This affects her too. Marcus's jaw tightened. What exactly is this about? I opened my briefcase again and pulled out a thick folder. This is about River Creek, your affair, your embezzlement, and your fraud. I know everything, Marcus. I placed the folder on his desk. This contains copies of invoices, photographs, financial records, and witness statements. Enough evidence to end your career and send you to prison. Marcus opened the folder with shaking hands, flipping through page after page of damning evidence. When he looked up, his face was ashen. Where did you get this? I told you, I have resources now. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I said I came to make you an offer. I'm prepared to give you the money you need to complete River Creek properly. Using the materials you contracted to use, meeting all the specifications you promised. In exchange, you're going to make some changes. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What kind of changes? First, you're going to end this affair immediately. Jennifer, you're going to resign today and find employment elsewhere. I'll provide you with 6 months severance pay to help with the transition. Jennifer nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Second, you're going to tell Diane everything. The affair, the financial problems, all of it. She deserves to know the truth, and you're going to give her the choice of whether to forgive you or leave you. Mom, I'm not finished. Third, you're going to repay every penny you stole from the company with interest. And fourth, you're going to complete River Creek exactly as promised, with quality materials and craftsmanship that will give those families the homes they deserve. Marcus stared at me. And if I refuse? Then I turn this evidence over to the district attorney, the city attorney, and the local newspaper. Your business will be destroyed. Your marriage will end anyway when Diane finds out during the trial, and you'll spend the next several years in prison. You're my mother, Marcus said quietly. You wouldn't really do that to your own son. I met his eyes steadily. Try me. The room was silent for several long moments. Finally, Marcus spoke. How much money are we talking about? $2 million. Enough to complete the project properly and cover your other obligations. And in return, I have to confess everything to Diane and end things with Jennifer. Those are the terms. Marcus looked at Jennifer, who was crying quietly at her desk. Then he looked back at me. I need time to think about this. You have until 5 o'clock today. After that, the offer expires, and I make my other calls. I closed my briefcase and stood to leave. Oh, and Marcus? Don't even think about trying to run. I have investigators watching your every move now. The money, the evidence, the witnesses, it's all protected and documented. The only way out is through. I walked to the door, then turned back. I'm disappointed in you, son. But I still love you. That's why I'm giving you this chance to do the right thing. I went home and waited. At 3:30 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Mom? It's Marcus. Have you made your decision? Yes. I accept your terms. All of them. All of them.
Good.
I'll have Robert draw up the papers. The money will be held in escrow until you've fulfilled your part of the agreement. Mom, I want you to know.
I'm sorry. For all of it.
I don't know how I became this person. I don't know either, Marcus. But maybe now you have a chance to remember who you used to be. That evening, Marcus went home to face his wife. I know this because Diane called me at 10 o'clock that night, sobbing. Mrs. Backer, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to call. It's all right, dear. Marcus told you. Everything. The affair, the money, the problems with his business. I feel like I don't even know the man I'm married to. What will you do? I don't know. The children, they're so young. And I love him, despite everything. But I don't know if I can trust him again. You don't have to make any decisions tonight, Diane.
Take your time.
Think about what you need, what the children need. He said you're helping him fix the business problems. I'm helping him fix the damage he's caused to other people. Whether he can fix the damage he's caused to his family is up to him and you. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus threw himself into the River Creek project with an intensity one hadn't seen from him in years. He fired the subcontractor who had been supplying inferior materials and hired a new one who would meet the original specifications. He worked 12-hour days, personally overseeing every aspect of the construction. Patricia continued her surveillance, but now she was documenting Marcus's efforts to make things right rather than gathering evidence of wrongdoing. He's actually doing it, she reported during one of our meetings. Quality materials, proper installation techniques, everything by the book. The families are going to get exactly what they were promised. And his personal situation? Jennifer took your severance offer and moved to another city. Marcus has been going to marriage counseling with Diane twice a week. I can't say whether they'll work things out, but he's making an effort. Meanwhile, I had my own adjustments to make. Living with $12 million was different from living on a fixed income, but I was determined not to let the money change who I was fundamentally. I bought a new car, nothing fancy, just a reliable sedan to replace the aging compact I'd been driving. I hired a housekeeper to come once a week, more for the company than the help. And I started a foundation to help elderly people maintain their independence and dignity. But the most satisfying purchase I made was a small house just 2 blocks from River Creek. I planned to move there once the development was complete, so I could keep an eye on the community and make sure the families got the support they needed. 6 weeks after Marcus had accepted my terms, Carmen Rodriguez called with an update. Mrs. Backer, I wanted you to know, we had our final inspection yesterday. Everything passed with flying colors. The homes are beautiful, and they're built to last. How are the families feeling? They're thrilled and grateful. Several of them asked me to thank you specifically. They don't need to thank me. They deserve good homes. Mrs. Backer, can I ask you something? Are you satisfied with how this all worked out? I thought about that question for a long time. Marcus was working to rebuild his marriage and his integrity. The River Creek families were getting the homes they'd been promised. Justice had been served, but mercy had been extended as well. Yes, I said finally. I think Harold would be proud. 3 months after the River Creek project was completed, I was settling into my new home when Patricia called with an unexpected piece of news. Meredith, I think you need to see something. Can I come over? She arrived an hour later, carrying a thick manila envelope. Remember how I was keeping tabs on Marcus to make sure he was living up to his agreement? Of course. Well, I discovered something interesting. Marcus isn't the only one who's been hiding things from his family. Patricia opened the envelope and pulled out a series of documents and photographs. Your daughter-in-law, Diane, has been conducting some investigations of her own. Apparently, she hired a private investigator about 6 months ago, before Marcus's confession, because she suspected the affair. Good for her. She's smarter than I gave her credit for. There's more. Diane's investigator uncovered something that mine missed. Marcus has a half-brother. I felt like the room had tilted. A what? Harold had an affair in 1985. The woman's name was Linda Patterson. She was his secretary at the insurance company where he worked. She had a son, David, who is now 39 years old. I stared at the documents, trying to process what Patricia was telling me. Harold, my Harold, had cheated on me? Had a child with another woman? Are you sure about this? DNA test confirmed it. Diane's investigator tracked down Linda Patterson's son as part of investigating Marcus's background for the divorce proceedings. David Patterson has been living in Seattle, working as a social worker. He has no idea who his father was. Linda never told him. My hands were shaking as I looked at the photographs Patricia had brought. David Patterson looked remarkably like Harold had at that age. The same kind eyes, the same gentle smile. Why didn't Harold tell me? According to Linda Patterson, who Diane's investigator interviewed, Harold never knew about the pregnancy. Linda discovered she was pregnant after Harold ended the affair and returned to trying to work things out with you. She decided not to tell him because she didn't want to destroy his marriage. I felt like I was drowning. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, my husband was suddenly in question. Meredith, are you all right? I need some time to think about this. After Patricia left, I sat in my new living room, staring at the photographs of the son Harold never knew he had. Part of me was angry, furious that Harold had betrayed our marriage vows. But part of me was heartbroken for this man who had grown up without knowing his father, and for Harold, who had died without knowing he had another son. I called Robertson. Robert, I need you to find someone for me. His name is David Patterson, and he lives in Seattle. Is this related to Marcus's situation? No, this is personal. Family business. It took Robert 3 days to track down David Patterson's contact information. I stared at the phone number for hours before I finally worked up the courage to dial. Hello. Is this David Patterson? Yes, who's calling? My name is Meredith Backer. I knew your mother, Linda Patterson, many years ago. Silence. Then, my mother passed away 5 years ago. I know. I'm sorry for your loss. David, I'm calling because I have some information about your father. Another long silence. I don't know who my father was. My mother never told me. His name was Harold Backer. He was my husband. I heard David's sharp intake of breath. Your husband? He passed away 5 years ago, around the same time as your mother, actually. He never knew about you, David. If he had, I know he would have wanted to be part of your life. I don't understand. Are you saying? I'm saying you have a family here that you've never met. A half-brother named Marcus, and a stepmother who would very much like to get to know you. David flew to town the following weekend. I picked him up at the airport, and the moment I saw him walking toward me, I started crying. He was so much like Harold, not just in appearance, but in the way he moved, the way he carried himself. Mrs. Backer? Please call me Meredith.
Or,
I hesitated, then continued, you could call me Mom if you'd like. We spent the weekend talking, sharing stories, filling in the gaps of 39 years. David was everything I'd hoped Marcus would become. Kind, ethical, dedicated to helping others. He worked with at-risk youth in Seattle, had never been married but was engaged to a lovely woman named Sarah, who is a teacher. I always wondered about my father, he told me as we sat in my garden. Mom would never talk about him, but sometimes I caught her looking at me with this sad expression, like she was seeing someone else. She loved him, I said. And he loved her, though he tried to fight it because he was married to me. I think they both made the best choices they could under difficult circumstances. Are you angry? About the affair, about me? I considered the question carefully. I was angry when I first found out, but I've had some time to think about it and I've realized something. Harold and I went through a very difficult period in our marriage in the mid-80s. We were having problems, we'd grown apart, we were both unhappy. The affair was wrong, but it wasn't malicious. And you're not the product of something ugly. You're Harold's son, and that makes you a gift. On Sunday, before David flew back to Seattle, I introduced him to Marcus. It was an awkward meeting. Marcus was still dealing with his own guilt and shame, and suddenly discovering he had a half-brother who seemed to embody all the virtues he'd lost along the way was difficult for him. I'm sorry about your troubles, David said quietly. If there's anything I can do to help. Marcus looked puzzled. Why would you want to help me? You barely know me. Because you're my brother. And because sometimes people need second chances. After David left, Marcus came to see me. He's a better man than I am, he said. He's had different experiences than you have. But it's not too late for you to become the man you want to be. Do you think Dad would be proud of him? I think your father would be proud of both his sons if they continue to work on becoming the best versions of themselves. Over the next few months, Marcus and David began to develop a relationship. David visited again at Christmas, bringing his fiancée Sarah to meet the family. Even Diane, who had been struggling with whether to forgive Marcus, seemed to find hope in David's presence. He's proof that our family can produce good people, she told me privately. Maybe Marcus can remember how to be one of them. David also brought something else into our lives: perspective. His work with troubled youth had taught him about redemption, about the possibility of change, about the importance of family support in helping people turn their lives around. Marcus made some bad choices, he told me during one of our conversations. But he's trying to make amends. That counts for something. You're very forgiving.
I'm practical.
I spent 39 years without a family. I'm not going to waste any more time holding grudges. By spring, word had gotten out about my involvement in the River Creek situation. I hadn't sought publicity, but in a small city, news travels fast. The local newspaper ran a story about the lottery winner who saved a community, and suddenly I was receiving calls from people all over the country. Some were requests for money, which I'd expected and learned to politely decline. But others were more interesting. People who had been cheated by contractors, elderly residents being pressured to sell their homes, families facing eviction because of fraudulent business practices. I realized that my experience with Marcus had given me something valuable: knowledge of how to investigate wrongdoing and the resources to do something about it. That's when I decided to expand my foundation. I want to help people who are being taken advantage of, I told Robert Chen as we worked on the legal paperwork. Elderly people, working families, anyone who doesn't have the resources to fight back against fraud and exploitation. That's a noble goal, Meredith. But it's also a big undertaking. You'll need staff, investigators, lawyers. Then we'll hire them. I have the money, and I have the motivation. The Backer Foundation for Justice and Dignity launched 6 months later. Our first case came from Carmen Rodriguez, who had been contacted by a group of senior citizens whose retirement home was being sold to developers who planned to evict all the residents. The residents have long-term leases that are supposed to protect them, Carmen explained. But the new owners are claiming the leases are invalid and forcing everyone out. I hired Patricia Wong as the foundation's chief investigator, and she dove into the case with her usual thoroughness. Within 2 weeks, she'd uncovered evidence that the developers had bribed city officials to ignore the lease protections and fast-track their eviction proceedings. The story made national news when the developers were arrested and the residents were allowed to stay in their homes. More importantly, it sent a message that there were people willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Marcus, meanwhile, had completed his community service, which I'd arranged as part of his agreement to avoid prosecution, and was working to rebuild his business reputation. He'd taken on several projects specifically focused on affordable housing, and he was doing them at cost with no profit margin. "I'm trying to pay back what I owe," he told me during one of our weekly dinners, a tradition we'd established after everything settled down. Not just the money, but the trust. "How are things with Diane?" "Better. We're still in counseling, but we're talking more honestly than we have in years. And the kids, they're starting to trust me again." "I'm proud of you, Marcus." He looked surprised. "Are you?" "Even after everything I did, especially because of everything you did. It would have been easy to stay the same after you got caught. Instead, you chose to change. That takes courage." David had moved to town the previous month, taking a job with the city's social services department. He and Sarah were planning a summer wedding, and they'd asked me to walk David down the aisle since Harold wasn't there to do it. "I always wondered what it would be like to have a father give me away at my wedding," he'd said. "Having you do it feels right." The night before the wedding, Marcus came to my house, looking nervous. "I have something to tell you," he said, "about David's wedding tomorrow." "What about it?" "I've been thinking about the toast I'm supposed to give at the reception. As his brother. And I realize there's something I need to say, not just to David, but to everyone." "What's that?" "I need to tell the truth. About the affair, about the business problems, about how you saved me from myself. David deserves to know the whole story, and so does everyone else." I studied my son's face. "Are you sure about this? Once you say it publicly, you can't take it back." "I'm sure. I've been hiding from the truth for too long. It's time to be honest." The wedding was beautiful. David looked handsome in his tuxedo, and Sarah was radiant in her grandmother's wedding dress. As I walked David down the aisle, I felt Harold's presence strongly, as if he were walking beside us, proud of the son he'd never known he had. During the reception, Marcus stood up to give his toast. The room fell quiet as he began to speak. "Most of you know that David and I only met 8 months ago," he began. "What you might not know is the story of how we found each other and what it taught me about family, forgiveness, and second chances." He told them everything. About Harold's affair, about his own failures, about my decision to help him find his way back to being an honorable man. He talked about the River Creek families, about the importance of keeping promises, about the difference between being successful and being worthy of respect. "My brother David spent 39 years without knowing who his father was," Marcus concluded. "But in the past 8 months, he's shown me what it means to carry on Harold Backer's legacy. He's shown me that family isn't just about blood, it's about standing by each other, especially when we don't deserve it." He raised his glass. "To David and Sarah, and to the family that found each other just when we needed it most." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, including mine. Later that evening, as the celebration was winding down, Patricia Wong approached me. "Meredith, I've been thinking about something. You've used your lottery winnings to help a lot of people, Marcus, the River Creek families, the senior citizens, David's wedding. But what have you done for yourself?" I looked around the room at the people I'd come to think of as my chosen family, David and Sarah, Marcus and Diane and their children, Carmen Rodriguez, Robert Chen, even Patricia herself. "I think I've done plenty for myself," I said. "I've learned that revenge is only satisfying if it leads to something better. And I've discovered that sometimes the best way to fix what's broken is to build something new." 2 years after winning the lottery, I was invited to speak at a conference on elder advocacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had nearly been forced into assisted living against her will was now considered an expert on protecting seniors' rights. The conference was being held in the ballroom of the Grandview Hotel, the same hotel where Marcus had conducted his affair with Jennifer. I'd specifically requested that venue when the organizers asked for my preferences. Some circles, I'd learned, needed to be completed deliberately. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of social workers, attorneys, and advocates, I thought about how much had changed since that Tuesday morning when Marcus had burst into my house with his ultimatum. 3 years ago, I was a 75-year-old widow living on a fixed income, and my son was trying to force me into a nursing home so he could sell my house and control my finances. Today, I'm a 78-year-old foundation director who has helped dozens of families fight fraud and exploitation. The difference wasn't just the lottery ticket, it was remembering that age is not the same thing as helplessness. I told them about the Backer Foundation's work, about the cases we'd won, and the people we'd helped. I talked about the importance of treating elderly people as individuals with rights and dignity, not as problems to be managed or assets to be controlled. But mostly, I talked about the power of refusing to be a victim. The people who try to take advantage of seniors, whether they're family members or strangers, count on us being isolated, confused, and ashamed. They count on us not fighting back. The most powerful thing we can do is prove them wrong. After my speech, a young woman approached me during the reception. "Mrs. Backer? I'm Jennifer Collins. I used to work for your son." I recognized her immediately, though she looked different, more confident, more professional. "Jennifer, how are you?" "I'm good. Really good. I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For forcing me to take a hard look at my life. When you confronted me about the affair, I was angry at first. But then I realized you were right. I was helping Marcus steal from his family and his business partners. I was becoming someone I didn't want to be." "What are you doing now?" "I'm a paralegal at a firm that specializes in family law. I help people going through divorces, custody battles, situations where they need someone on their side. It's honest work, and I'm proud of what I do." "I'm glad to hear that." Jennifer hesitated, then continued. "I also wanted you to know, Marcus was right about one thing. His marriage to Diane was in trouble long before I came along. But that didn't make what we did right. I'm sorry for my part in it." "Have you spoken to Marcus recently?" "No, and I don't plan to. But I heard about his new projects, about how he's been working to help low-income families get quality housing. It sounds like he's found his way back to being the person he should be." That evening, I had dinner with David and Sarah, who had driven down from the city, where David now ran a regional program for at-risk youth. Sarah was 6 months pregnant with their first child, Harold's first grandchild, and my first step-grandchild. "How was the conference?" David asked. "Inspiring. There are a lot of people doing good work to protect vulnerable populations." "Including you," Sarah added. "I read the article about the foundation in Social Work today. You've helped more than 60 families in the past 2 years. We've helped them help themselves. That's an important distinction." David smiled. "You sound like Dad." According to Marcus, Harold always said the best help was the kind that gave people tools to solve their own problems. "Your father was a wise man. Flawed but wise." "Speaking of Marcus," Sarah said, "he called yesterday. He and Diane want to know if you'd like to come to their anniversary party next month." I was surprised. Their anniversary? I thought they were still in counseling. They are. But apparently, they've decided to celebrate the anniversary of when they started over, rather than when they first got married. Marcus said it was more honest. The idea appealed to me. Starting over was something I understood well. Marcus and Diane's New Beginning anniversary party was held in their backyard, with simple decorations and homemade food. It was a far cry from the elaborate gatherings they used to host, but it felt more genuine. Their children, my grandchildren, had grown so much in the past few years. Teenage Emma was now volunteering with the Foundation's youth outreach program, and 12-year-old Alex had started a neighborhood recycling initiative that had caught the attention of the city council. "They're good kids," I told Diane as we watched them help serve food to the guests. "They get it from their grandfather," she replied. "The Harold they never met, but whose values Marcus has been working to rediscover. And from their parents, who had the courage to rebuild their marriage instead of just walking away." Diane looked thoughtful. "You know, I used to resent you for interfering in our lives. I thought you were being vindictive, using your lottery money to control Marcus. What changed your mind?"
Time.
"And watching what you've done with that money since then. You could have destroyed Marcus completely, but instead you gave him a chance to save himself. That took wisdom and compassion." As the party continued, I found myself talking with Carmen Rodriguez, who had become not just a colleague, but a close friend. "I have an idea for a new foundation project," she said. "What would you think about establishing a fund to help elderly people hire private investigators when they suspect they're being defrauded?" "I think that's brilliant. How did you come up with it?" "I've been getting calls from seniors all over the state who heard about what you did with Marcus. They're dealing with similar situations: adult children trying to control their finances, contractors taking advantage of them, scammers targeting them because of their age. Set up a meeting with Patricia. Let's see what it would take to make this happen." Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Marcus pulled me aside. "Mom, I want to show you something." He led me to his home office and pointed to a framed photograph on his desk, not the usual family portrait, but a picture of the River Creek development with all the families standing in front of their new homes. "I look at this every day," he said. "It reminds me what happens when you do the right thing. And what happens when you don't. That too. I never want to forget how close I came to destroying everything that mattered. The important thing is that you didn't. You made mistakes, but you fixed them." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Do you think Dad would forgive me? For the affair, for the fraud, for trying to put you in that home?" I thought about Harold, about the man he'd been, and the values he'd tried to instill in our son. "I think your father understood human weakness better than most people. He made his own mistakes, after all. But I also think he believed in redemption, in the possibility that people could change and become better than they were. I hope so, because I'm trying to be better. Every day. I know you are, and that's what matters." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought our family to this point. If someone had told me 3 years ago that my son's betrayal would ultimately lead to healing and growth for all of us, I would have thought they were crazy. But life, I'd learned, had a way of surprising you. The next morning, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up to my house. A woman in her 60s got out, looking nervous and uncertain. "Mrs. Backer? I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm Margaret Williams. I read about your foundation in the newspaper, and I was hoping you might be able to help me." I invited her in for coffee and listened to her story. Her son-in-law was pressuring her to sell her house and move into a retirement community, claiming she wasn't capable of living independently anymore. Meanwhile, he was using her credit cards for personal expenses and had somehow gotten himself added to her bank account. It was Marcus's story all over again, but with a different cast of characters. "What would you like me to do?" I asked when she finished. "I don't know. I don't have much money for lawyers or investigators. But I heard that you help people like me." "We do. And Margaret, I want you to know something. You're not helpless, and you're not alone. We're going to figure this out together." As I walked Margaret to her car an hour later, armed with Patricia Wong's business card and a plan for fighting back against her son-in-law's manipulation, I felt the familiar satisfaction of using my resources to level an unfair playing field. Harold had been right in his notebook. I was stronger than I knew. But more than that, I'd learned that strength multiplied when it was shared with others who needed it. The lottery ticket had given me money, but the real prize had been discovering that it's never too late to become the person you're meant to be. 5 years after buying that lottery ticket at Murphy's corner store, I found myself back where it all began. Kelly Murphy, now Kelly Murphy Chin after marrying Robert's nephew, had invited me to the store's anniversary celebration. "You're our most famous customer," she said as I cut the ribbon for the store's renovation. The lottery winner who changed everything. The everything she was referring to wasn't just my own life, but the ripple effect that had spread throughout our community. The Backer Foundation had grown from a one-woman operation to a regional organization with a staff of 12 and satellite offices in 3 cities. We'd helped more than 200 families fight fraud, exploitation, and abuse. Marcus's construction company had become a model for ethical business practices, with a waiting list of clients who wanted homes built by someone they could trust. He'd also started a mentorship program for young contractors, teaching them that doing good work and making a profit weren't mutually exclusive. David's work with at-risk youth had expanded into a statewide initiative, and he'd been nominated for a national award for his innovative programs. His daughter, my step-granddaughter, was now 2 years old and had Harold's same gentle eyes and curious nature. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in the relationships within our family. Marcus and I had dinner together every Sunday, a tradition that had evolved from obligation to genuine enjoyment. Diane had become the daughter I'd never had, and their children saw me not as the grandmother who had once been a burden, but as the family matriarch who had fought to keep everyone together. As I stood in Murphy's corner store, surrounded by neighbors and friends who had become part of my extended family, I thought about the speech I was scheduled to give later that evening at the Foundation's annual gala. "Mrs. Backer?" A voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see a young man in his 20s, well-dressed but nervous. "Yes, I'm Timothy Chen, Kelly's stepson. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time." "It's nice to meet you, Timothy. What can I do for you?" He glanced around, making sure we had privacy. "My grandfather, my mother's father, is having some problems with a financial advisor who's been pressuring him to make investments that don't seem right. My family has been trying to help, but we don't have the resources to investigate properly." I smiled. Even after 5 years, people still found their way to me when they needed help fighting injustice. "Call my office tomorrow morning," I said, handing him my card. "Ask for Patricia Wong. She'll know how to help." That evening, the Foundation's gala was held in the ballroom of the downtown hotel, a far cry from the small conference room where we'd held our first board meeting. 300 people filled the room, including many of the families we'd helped over the years. Carmen Rodriguez introduced me, sharing the story of how we'd met and worked together to protect the River Creek families. When Meredith Backer won $12 million, Carmen said, she could have spent it on herself, living a life of luxury and leisure. Instead, she chose to use her good fortune to create good fortune for others. She's proven that revenge doesn't have to be about destruction. Sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what was broken. As I took the podium, I looked out at the audience and saw faces that represented the journey I'd taken from that angry morning when Marcus had tried to force me from my home. When I was 75 years old, I began. My son tried to convince me that I was too old, too confused, and too vulnerable to manage my own life. He was wrong about my capabilities, but he was right about one thing: I was vulnerable. We all are at various points in our lives. The question isn't whether we'll face moments of vulnerability, but whether we'll have people willing to stand with us when we do. I talked about the Foundation's work, about the importance of treating people with dignity regardless of their age or circumstances. But mostly, I talked about the lesson I'd learned from my own experience. The most powerful thing we can do when someone tries to take advantage of us is to refuse to become victims. Not through anger or bitterness, but through action. Through building systems that protect others who face the same challenges. through using our experiences, even the painful ones, to create something positive. I paused, looking for Marcus in the audience. He was sitting with Diane and their children, and when our eyes met, he smiled and nodded encouragingly. My son made serious mistakes, I continued. He tried to control me. He defrauded his business partners. He betrayed his family's trust. But he also proved that people can change, that it's possible to rebuild trust and integrity even after they've been damaged. Sometimes the best revenge isn't punishment. It's giving someone the chance to become better than they were. The applause was warm and sustained, but the real reward came afterward, during the reception, when person after person approached me to share their own stories of overcoming adversity and fighting back against injustice. Margaret Williams, the woman who had come to me for help with her son-in-law 5 years earlier, was now volunteering with the foundation and had helped establish a support group for seniors facing financial abuse. "You saved my house," she told me. "But more than that, you saved my dignity." Jennifer Collins, Marcus's former secretary, had brought her new husband to the gala. She was now working as a victim's advocate and had testified before the state legislature about the need for stronger protections against elder fraud. "I wanted you to meet my husband, Tom," she said. "I've told him how you changed my life by refusing to let me hide from the truth about what I'd become." Even Patricia Wong, who had become both my chief investigator and one of my closest friends, seemed moved by the evening's events. "You know," she said as we watched the crowd of people networking and sharing stories, "when you first hired me to investigate Marcus, I thought you were just another angry rich lady looking for ammunition in a family feud. I had no idea you were planning to save him." "I wasn't at first," I admitted. "At first, I just wanted to make him pay for what he'd done to me. But somewhere along the way, I realized that the best way to win was to make sure everyone came out better than they started." As the evening wound down, my family gathered around me, Marcus and Diane and their children, David and Sarah and little Catherine, even some of the River Creek families who had become part of our extended network. "I have an announcement to make," I said. "I've been thinking about the future of the foundation, about what happens when I'm no longer able to run it." The group fell silent, waiting. "I'm not planning to go anywhere anytime soon," I continued with a smile. "But I want everyone to know that I'm establishing an endowment that will ensure the foundation's work continues indefinitely. And I'm naming David as my successor as executive director." David looked stunned. "Mom, Meredith, I'm honored, but are you sure? Marcus has more business experience." "And Marcus will continue to serve on the board," I said. "But you have something that's even more valuable than business experience. You have the heart for this work. You understand what it means to fight for people who can't fight for themselves." Marcus stepped forward.
She's right, David.
"This is your calling, and I'll be here to help however I can." As my family hugged and congratulated each other, I felt Harold's presence strongly. The notebook he'd left for me was still in my purse, and I touched it gently through the leather. "Never let them dim your light," he had written. "You're stronger than you know." He'd been right about the strength. But what he couldn't have known was that the light grows brighter when you use it to illuminate the path for others. 6 months later, I received a call that brought everything full circle. "Mrs. Backer? This is Detective Rodriguez with the District Attorney's Office. We've been investigating a large-scale scheme targeting elderly residents in nursing homes, and we'd like your foundation's help with the victims." "What kind of scheme?" "Financial advisors have been working with nursing home administrators to gain control of residents' assets. They're convincing families that their elderly relatives need professional management of their finances, then systematically draining their accounts." I felt a familiar anger rising, the same feeling I'd had when Marcus had tried to force me into assisted living. "How many victims?" "At least 40 that we know of, possibly more. Most of them are too intimidated or confused to come forward." "We'll help," I said without hesitation. "Send me the details." As I hung up the phone, I realized that my story, the one that had started with a lottery ticket and a son's betrayal, was still being written. Every person we helped, every case we won, every family we kept together was another chapter in a larger narrative about the power of refusing to be defeated by circumstances. I walked to the window of my office, housed now in a restored Victorian mansion that served as the Foundation's headquarters, and looked out at the garden where Harold's roses bloomed each spring. Tomorrow, I would start working on a new case, fighting for people who needed someone to stand with them against those who would take advantage of their vulnerability. But tonight, I would go home to the house I'd chosen to keep, in a neighborhood where I'd lived for more than 40 years, surrounded by the family and friends who had learned alongside me that sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived and a legacy that lifts others up. Marcus would be coming for dinner, another Sunday tradition that had grown from my insistence on maintaining family connections despite everything that had happened between us. David and Sarah would join us, along with little Catherine, who was just starting to say Grandma Meredith with delightful clarity. We would eat pot roast. I'd never stopped making Marcus's favorite meal for our Sunday dinners and talk about our week, our plans, our dreams. We would laugh together and sometimes cry together, the way families do when they've learned that love is stronger than disappointment and forgiveness is more powerful than revenge. And sometime during the evening, when the dishes were cleared and the conversation had turned to the comfortable sharing of daily concerns and small victories, I would look around the table at the people who had come back to me, not because I'd forced them to, but because we'd all learned how to be better than we used to be. The lottery ticket had given me $12 million, but the real jackpot was discovering that it's never too late to become the person you're meant to be. And that sometimes the best way to heal what's broken is to build something new and beautiful from the pieces. As I closed the Foundation office that evening and headed home to my family dinner, I smiled at the memory of the scared, angry woman I'd been 5 years earlier. She'd thought her story was ending when her son tried to force her from her home. She'd had no idea it was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to another incredible story here at Her True Stories. If Meredith's journey inspired you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We have so many more amazing tales of strength, resilience, and triumph to share with you. Remember, it's never too late to change your story, and sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let anyone else write your ending. Until next time, keep believing in the power of your own strength.